I guess we'll get started. My name's John DeLay, I'm the vice chair. John Fink apparently is not in attendance. We'll introduce the members of the planning board down at the end of the table.
I'm Patrick Lyons. I'm a alternate member.
Now we got
The
Nelson.
city hall people need to speak up.
I'm Patrick Lyons, a new alternate member on the planning board.
Nelson Gill.
Mr. Klaus.
Molly Friedland, also a new alternate member.
Also in attendance is Code Enforcement Officer Dwight Tilton, and I'll turn the meeting over to Teresa because she's running this one.
So if you're able to slide down a little bit more, they actually hear us through that guy right
No,
there.
not these.
So, yep, well, the meeting is being recorded, but they're gonna be able to hear you right there.
Okay.
So, yep.
So I believe, Carrie, you're here, right? Carrie Taylor? So Carrie will show up.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, Carrie's here too, excellent. So Carrie is here taking notes so that we can know what we talked about. And Dwight Tilton is here also, the codes officer. I'm Teresa Lexu, the city planner. This is a workshop. There are no applications on this agenda, and we're going to workshop for about a little under an hour. If anyone is from the public and you have comments, please feel free to ask us questions and call in. I want to tell all the planning board that at our special October 21st meeting, Superior Realty out in the Christian Ridge Road has proposed a solar panel, a small solar panel farm. If you want to pick up your application, it's here. The TRT report will be done by tomorrow afternoon, and I'm going to email that to all of you. And that's the only thing you pick up for the October 21 meeting. I've already given a copy to Patrick and John. So, I'm proposing that we look at the zoning districts and zoning map. And I have, what I'm proposing to do is review the map with you and talk about the uses in these different areas and some issues that I see with these uses, and then open it up to what you see. Quite a few, so some of us on this planning board have been on it for years and years and years. So you may have thoughts about this, what you think should be different, should boundaries be different, should uses be different, and I don't want to be a talking head, so just interrupt and jump in as I go through each zoning district. I'm also recognizing that several people have been on the board for a couple weeks or maybe a year, and so they're still getting used to the zoning ordinance, so I'm keeping that in mind. We're going to talk about that for a little bit, and then number 2 in the agenda says definitions. Carrie emailed you. She has been comparing the definitions in our code from the land use ordinance, shoreline zoning, subdivision, and trying to see what the differences are, because we want to coalesce them all into one. It gets really confusing trying to go back and forth. And then 3 and 4 talk about revisions to the Unified Development Ordinance, and I'm just going to combine that into one, that if you have any recommendations, you can talk about them. I don't even think we will get to that part of the agenda, and that's okay. Because this is a workshop, and we're just going to keep workshopping as we move along over the year or so. Does anybody have anything to say? Julio. So, Carrie emailed everybody a zoning map, so you have that in front of you, and I know it's tiny. I have the big map here that I'm going to be, can you see, oh, you can see my hand, that I'm going to be pointing to this and talking about some of these things. And you might want to turn to section 3 in your code, because I'm going to keep referring to it. I'm not going to talk about all details of all this, but just some general things to start thinking about. I'm also doing this exercise with you, and you're doing it with all of us, because a comprehensive plan is gonna we're gonna start working on it soon, in months. And you're gonna have to be digging into this, the comprehensive plan committee, but also they are gonna keep coming back to you, who immediately use the code. I also want you to recognize that I've only been in Ellsworth since the beginning of July. So you all know more than I do about this code, so keep that in mind. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me what you think of what I'm saying, because I'm trying to collect thoughts for when we start the comp plan process of reviewing all this stuff. So I'm gonna start with just some thoughts I have about each district. If you look in the inset of your map, that this is the downtown, mostly it's downtown, it's this brownish color. And if you've walked around in that area, there's a bunch of little streets, spruce, pine, elm, Hancock, Franklin. There's a lot of older homes in this district. And even at school and church, when you go up on State Street, older homes meaning from the 1800s. There was a fire in Ellsworth, as we all know, but it didn't go as far up here. And there also are homes built in like the 1920s, 1930s. So that's what I'm calling old. And I've heard from many people that live in these different neighborhoods. I walk a lot at lunch, and I meet people, and I have a general comment, and if anyone who's watching this disagrees with me, tell me, but I have heard in general that the people who live in this DT, downtown district, are not very happy with what we did to this zoning ordinance. In this district, you now can have all kinds of mixed uses. So, for instance, if you look at the land use chart, which is on 307, you can now have, on Hancock Street, it already happened, there's a bar right next to residence. Is that okay? I don't know. Makes a lot of noise, has light, it's bothering the neighbors. Is it reducing property values? On the other hand, it was put in an old bus garage. What were we gonna do with that bus garage? But the neighborhood, especially the spruce, pine, elm, specifically some people from there met with me and walked me around and said, our property values, are they being protected? So they're concerned about that in this downtown area, there's no dimensional requirements. You can pretty much, you don't have to have a lot size, you don't have to have setbacks. And does anyone have thoughts about that? Like, Dwight, did you want to say anything? Because when you first came here, that wasn't like this. Don't mean to put you on the spot, you don't have to.
That's correct, Teresa, it wasn't. But a lot of thought went into putting this together.
Okay.
And we went back, the committee that was involved with doing this went back and looked at some of the historic uses in those neighborhoods, some of the buildings that were commercial, that were converted to residential. At that time, we thought it all fit pretty good. I still think it fits pretty good. The only concern I have is from the code enforcement point of view, is the zero setbacks, because that does cause some problems sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, so that's something to think about, is the setbacks and that sort of thing, and what uses are allowed there. When you look at your use chart, you see it's, you do quite a bit down there. When you walk through it, it seems like residential neighborhoods, but it won't stay that way if we keep this code. Maybe we don't want it to.
Well, maybe we're at a point that we should look at, especially the downtown neighborhood, because I know there's been problems there in the past, and Teresa referenced the bar that was there, and I know there's been issues with that. I know at least one family has moved because of, I don't know if they were right next to the bar or very close vicinity, and some of the neighbors have had problems with the bar, with the patrons parking on their property, parking on their lawn, parking in their driveways. And not just to pick on the bar, but maybe we need to look at what's actually allowed in the downtown area. You know, if a business, whether it be a bar or something else, moves into the downtown area and it upsets the the neighborhood. I mean, that's a residential neighborhood. I mean, granted, you know, there are some businesses there, but, I think this was one that kind of stands out that maybe shouldn't have been put there.
Yeah.
And maybe we need to look at that downtown area and tighten up what is allowed there.
Yeah, and I anticipate that when the comprehensive plan committee looks at land use, they'll be looking at each neighborhood, each zone and or each neighborhood, and, you know, does this still fit in 2020 to 20, whatever, how long our plan goes?
I mean, many years ago, I lived on Pine Street, which is, you know, just up the road from the bar, and I'm thinking, well, geez, I wouldn't have wanted a bar
Yeah.
the next door, the next house over.
Notwithstanding, you know, the conflict between, say, a bar and residential housing and so forth, part of this, though, has to do with what philosophy you want to have in terms
That's right.
of establishing downtown and so forth. If you want a philosophy that keeps it all single family and spread out, or potentially spread out, or whatever, versus, you know, kind of cool and hip downtown.
Yeah.
So I think all this has to be considered in terms of, in lieu of that philosophy, not in lieu of, but in the context of that philosophy. The other thing I wanted to ask is if we start changing the zoning map, you know, kind of, you know, either little bit by little bit or in a comprehensive way, what exactly is the liability for the city in, you know, suddenly changing a zoning boundary and things like that?
Patrick, do you have thoughts of that? Since you're an attorney, I think you might be able to articulate that better than me,
Yeah, just to be clear to everyone, I'm not the city's attorney,
right?
so I just.
As a
so we all-
hobby.
Yeah, as we all know that. As far as liability goes, there wouldn't be any like legal liability to the city. It's a legislative process. Ultimately, the city council has to approve any changes to the zoning of the city. What you end up doing though is you create non-conforming uses.
Right.
And so it's called grandfathering. It's known as grandfathering, but the common language, modern language, call it non-conformities. So if we kind of vacillate back and forth between allowing certain uses and then disallowing them, those uses that are there are allowed to continue. There's limitations, they can't expand, or there's limitations on that, but they would be allowed to continue. It's zoning is like I think what we're talking about is it's a process where a lot of people, comprehensive planning is done to provide a roadmap for the city, and then that comprehensive plan is what a planning board and a city council would use to potentially guide it on any changes to zoning. I think it's whenever you have an opportunity to address to take a new look at all this, it's a good time to get feedback and think about what do we want for this area. And so that the downtown expanded the permitted uses. Some people don't like that. Some people like it a lot. Some people are drawn to living there. I, for one, actually lived on Franklin Street right when Fogtown was opening, and I was excited by it.
Excellent.
And then, I ended up buying a house, off of the Surrey Road just because we found a place we liked. But so I think it's all, but the important thing is people get involved with the conversation and we discuss it.
Yeah, and thank you. And what Rick Lyle said, I really appreciate that. Like, what is the vision? Do we have the comprehensive plan has not been updated in a really long time. And as we update it, we have to think about our vision. And so I'm not gonna guess what Michelle was thinking, our past planner, but from all the notes I've written, I think she was envisioning this as a mixed use. Oh, what did you say, Rick? A hip place, like a hip mix, but I know what you mean, like she's from Montreal, like she's thinking that way. And And maybe we do like that. I know that the spruce, pine, elm, I'll call them a crowd, a little tiny crowd of people, they're concerned about the property values, and they're historic. And so I suggested they go talk to the historic district, like, do we want another historic district down here or not? Or something like that. So, great, that's just some things to think about with the downtown. I'm gonna move on to the urban, which is this orangey color. And you can see there's lots of splotches of that. And this is to provide a mix of commercial uses, like retail, professional offices, dense residential. We do have those uses in there. We have lots of examples of dense residential in here. If you look down toward the Lemoyne line, I'm pointing down here, there's some subdivisions over there. There's quite a few all mixed in here. They're also in the neighborhood area too. And that's what we're trying to do, is have some of these dense areas. I know that, okay, somebody's gonna correct me because I'm gonna say it wrong, but, can't remember his name, but there's a developer that built a lot of smaller homes, more affordable, Bob something, and he's passed away.
Ray,
Pardon?
Ray.
Bob Ray has put in quite a few little neighborhoods, and our zoning works for that, and I personally just think that's great, that's my opinion, so that we have a mixed use of housing, and that really works. We don't really have a lot to say about the urban, it's there, we have a lot of spots of it. There's an urban spot out on the Buttermilk Road that was put there, that's out here by Lemoyne, that was put there to try to have more commercial uses, and there's no development out there right now. Do we really need it? Maybe it's something that the comp plan committee will look at. And it's stuck out there. Might be something they think about.
So I have a question. So is the comprehensive plan committee already been formed?
No,
No, okay.
no, we're waiting. So I'll tell you about the comp plan in a couple sentences. So the comp plan's very old, it's 2004. There have been some updates to parts of it, but not the whole thing. We're not consistent with the state law, so that we cannot get different grants and things like that, so we want to update it. The council does too. They want to do this. It came up this summer to fund it, and some money was requested, and the council couldn't feel they could do that at this time with COVID. How do we know what money we're gonna have to spend? Maybe we should put this off. It seemed to make sense to me, and so it will come forward to them again. And when we have a new city manager too, next year, and get this formed and moving. Meanwhile, in my planning office, and reviewing all the different plans we have a housing plan, we have some transportation stuff, we have all these, I'm compiling all those so that when we do hire a consultant, we have a good start. Like, here's what we've already done, so they won't have to do that, so we can do that in the house.
And is it the idea that the comprehensive plan committee would seek feedback and input from the planning board?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Will there be any like joint meetings or anything like that?
I anticipate that.
Okay.
And I personally have written a good handful of comprehensive plans and always partner with the planning board. And I think it's important to not just have one or two planning board members on the comp plan committee. I think the comp plan committee, someone should come to planning board workshops, or so that you guys aren't just being presented at the end with, this is all the stuff we came up with, and by the way, you have to implement it. I don't think that's right. So.
Great, thank you.
Neighborhood are these big yellow spots on the map. And there's lots of, this is where we have residences, and you can see from the lot lines that subdivisions have been made. You know, you see a lot of them all together. So there's neighborhoods that were created. For instance, there's one, if you look at the word Leonard Lake in the middle, and you go west. This is Sugar Way. Lots of little houses there, affordable housing. If you go down, I don't know if you guys can see me pointing, I think you can. But right here, there's Westwood Drive and all these, there's a bunch of residents there. So our zoning over here is, Jackson Lab is here in the commercial, and in this yellow place, this is Grandview and Beachland. Remember we were all just looking at that about the Lot 5 splitting? So I think our neighborhood is working, our zone, we're making little neighborhoods of different income levels too, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of these little neighborhoods are low income, some of them are more moderate, and like American up here is more wealthier homes. We have sort of different income levels, it's a good mix, I think. It's kind of great. And for those who are like, why are these lines here? If you're like, I've never seen a zoning map, I don't know who knows what. But the lines are drawn where we think that stuff's gonna grow, where we want it to be, and by lot lines. So, this neighborhood here, next to American, you see this big giant yellow back here? That's one lot, and who's that? It's the mansion that got taken down. Who knows who built that American subdivision? He's passed away, his son's still alive. Nothing's coming to anybody. Anyways, that's why that big
Oh,
lot is
it's
there.
Robbie Grant, was it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it was Alice Carlisle's property.
Yeah, Robbie Grant, did you say, Dwight?
Oh, he's still alive.
Oh, he's still alive?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think he inherited from Alice Carlisle.
Yeah,
And-
That's correct.
And Dwight, have you ever heard any like rumors or anything that might, like more stuff might go back there? I know we don't know, but.
What do you mean about going back there?
Well, I mean, I would just wonder if more
You mean
subdivision will
being
happen.
developed?
Yeah, yeah.
I think once the demand comes back,
Yeah.
that land will be subdivided and developed.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of. And then, you know, in terms of planning, in my opinion, like that's a great idea. It's closer to town. It's not out in the big rural areas. Let's try to keep it closer in. So maybe that's a great idea.
I think what we need to be careful of, especially for areas like the neighborhood, is, you know, because occasionally something comes to the board for, make a recommendation to the council on a zone change. And, you know, people buying houses, living in the neighborhood, you know, they're right on the edge in many of these of the urban zone, which includes, you know, offices and buildings and businesses. And, you know, sometimes, you know, the businesses want to expand,
Yep.
you know, and where do they go? They go into the, you know, neighborhood zone. And, you know, I think that's when sometimes you come up with problems that you're, you know, you have these neighborhood zones, people are buying houses because of the residential area, and then all of a sudden other uses are intruding, you know, maybe on the first lot. I mean, obviously, you're not gonna change the zone change a lot right in the middle of the zone.
Right.
But as it creeps in, you know, we saw that up on, Lakes Lane. You know,
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
a couple months ago, a year ago.
A good example of what John's talking about is if you look at your insert and you look at Union Street, see there's like Main Street and then Union, see where that goes up and the hospital's up there? At the beginning of Union Street, there used to be a dentist office and in a big white building. I mean, it's still there, and then next door to it was like a woman's clinic or something in the yellow house, I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. Those used to be homes. And now I happen to know that the dental house, someone just bought it for a residence. I don't know if the whole sale's gonna go through, and that may change the use. And the yellow house, which was a women's clinic, is that gonna stay some kind of a medical place, or is it gonna turn into maybe apartments, or someone like a single unit again? Someone who has a big family, like we don't, you know, the uses can change because you can do quite a few things in that neighborhood. So all kind of things to think about. In the neighborhood zone and in rural too, but let's talk about in the neighborhood zone. you're allowed to do a single family or a detached dwelling unit. We just looked at this on Kelly Estates, which I know is in the rural area, but it's 813.4 in performance standards. If you're a single family and a detached dwelling or a detached dwelling unit, you're exempt from landscaping. So for instance, when Kelly Estates came forward, they don't have to do any landscaping, yet it's a multifamily place out in the rural area. If you wanted to, you could just cut everything down, and what does that do to what Ellsworth looks like? Is that something we want to care about? Do we want to concentrate on beautifying Ellsworth, making it look a certain way? And that 813 in the performance standards, there's quite a few things that are exempt. What does that do to property values? That's just something I think we should look at. And I'm sorry that Mark's not here. He had to work at the last minute. He's sorry he's not here. He's really interested in design guidelines being put in. Does everyone know what those are? Do you guys all know what design guidelines are?
And for the
I do
building
not know
itself?
what design guidelines are.
Yeah, so design guidelines are, it's enhancing your performance standards part of your code. And it's talking more about, what kind of landscaping do we want, and what do we want places to look like? And you concentrate more on what a place looks like and the form of, and how it's functioning on a lot, as opposed to what the use is. And it can change the way your community looks in a very positive way. And that's something I'll talk to you guys more about, that we could or could not put in our code. And I think it could increase property values in Ellsworth, but then it also makes more for people to jump through.
How do design guidelines, you know, what you just said, how things look and so forth, how does that square up with the definition of zoning as a police power?
So, how does it square up? You're allowed to do design guidelines, they are upheld in court. It fits in with your zoning. I don't know how to answer that question. I think I need to be able to answer that better, and I can't.
Okay.
I mean, police powers are a broad power. It's the health and well-being as well as others, and I think these types of standards have been upheld by courts as
Yep.
within the zoning powers of a municipality. Again, it's a policy question, right? Because
Yes.
it's a double-edged sword. Maybe it makes things look nicer, maybe it increases property values, but is it more onerous and burdensome on, developers and property owners? Does that make certain properties too expensive and thus unavailable to other, it is legal, but it's a policy question.
And it's a tool used more in southern Maine than, I don't know if it's used like in Bangor and Brewer, I haven't looked into that. I've developed design guidelines in some other towns, and it can get quite sophisticated, but it gives the planning board a more subjective view when you're viewing projects. Because right now, all you got is this pared down code, which might be really good for Ellsworth. But if you want Ellsworth to look a different way, it's something to think, it's just a thing to think about.
I mean, I think it's a good idea in concept. I mean, I guess it depends on how far you take it. I mean,
Yes.
and not to mention specific developers, but you look at, multi-unit apartments that have gone up recently, and some developers build buildings that are very attractive, I think add to the view of the city. And then perhaps other ones are just kind of your basic cookie cutter,
Yeah,
square boxes, or, no aesthetics to them.
right.
I don't want to add a lot of cost to developers, but, I think there are some inexpensive things that people could do. I mean, even from the standpoint, I've always inquired when somebody brings a multifamily building to us, like, give us a schematic of it, geez, I'd at least like to see what it's gonna look like.
Yeah, and for example, in the town of Topsom, I worked on and put in design guidelines there, I mean, the whole town did, but in their code, they have schematics that the planning board can look at and show to the developer and say, hey, you know, in our mixed-use commercial area, we'd like you to have what Topsom wants the place to look like, for instance, is, you know, we want pitched roofs. We want a commercial place to look more residential when it's on the main street, even though it's a residential use. Could you have pitched roofs? Could you have architectural design standards that are not gonna cost that much more, or maybe not at all? But it helps developers be more creative, and it's more you can present to them. Just something else to think about. I'm gonna go on to
I
our.
would just say that
Yep.
along those lines,
Yep.
you know, right now, the planning board seems pretty restricted in the kinds of things that they can do along those lines. I mean, it's kind of like, gee, you know, the developer needs some sort of rudimentary guidelines, and that's it. The question is really, how do you step up to the next level of guidelines?
Right, right, and I mean, this really struck me when we looked at Kelly Estates. And Jim Kaiser followed all the rules. He did everything he was supposed to do, but that's gonna be a pretty plain, boring development, no landscaping, no, good lighting it's subjective, but no good lighting plan. He's just gonna have little lights on each thing, no sidewalks, no place to park bikes, no, the buildings, we didn't even get to see what they look like. What harm would it be if he showed us what they look, he knows what they look like, they've already figured that out, but we didn't even get to look at it, because he doesn't have to show us. So if we had design guidelines in there, we could say, oh, this is what it's gonna look like, you know, could you add porches, would that add more? And he'd go, yes, or he'd say, oh no, maybe the people who buy these might want a porch, for instance. Or maybe people do want a street light at the beginning and the end of the road. Sure, I could add that. Or, no, I can't, but then we can give them some things to think about. Right now, we can't give them anything to think about.
Do we expect that the comprehensive plan might have some things to say about something like design guidelines?
Yes, it would be when they're considering the vision of what the town will look like, and that could get integrated into the land use zoning. Yeah. I think that Ellsworth is it is a middle-sized community in Maine, and a lot of the zoning, which is a lot of the other towns in Maine like this too, we started with shoreline zoning, and then we took our land use ordinance and built it around that and made it grow, and that's what towns in Maine have done, which is fair. But Ellsworth is the same size, its population is from 8 to 10,000 people. There are 15 towns that have 8 to 10,000 people. And if you look at some of these other towns, there's Skowhegan, Yarmouth, Lisbon, and Lisbon Falls, and Topsom. Their zoning, and I study zoning ordinances, their zoning ordinances are way more sophisticated than ours. I don't think they're more difficult to do, and their towns look way different than ours. We also are down east, and we're further up, and we have a poorer, more low-income population than southern Maine. So like, there's all these things to think about. You don't want to price people out. People need a place to live. But then we also are getting wealthier people moving up here, especially with California's on fire. And the southern part of the states are flooding. I mean, we hear this all the time. And the people are moving, and they're already moving here. There are bidding wars in Ellsworth now. There's homes that start for $185,000 go up to $250 in 3 days. Because someone from Connecticut sold their house for $500, so they'll pay $250 for a house here. And then we can't afford it, the people who live here. So that is happening, it's happening fast. And I just feel like if we don't up our zoning ordinance, we're gonna have stuff growing and building in Ellsworth that's maybe not our vision.
You know, unfortunately, none of that's gonna change until, you know, the comprehensive plan change, you know, is
Yes.
updated. And, you know, even if we started today, I mean, it's a, what, year and a half
Yep,
process? I mean, it's not quick.
no. No, but it's really important to get it going. Did somebody online have something? I heard a voice.
Yeah, that was me. I just, this is an interesting topic. I do think a lot more discussion in committee, because I do think there are a lot of points of view, some that are coming out of the conversation right here. As a Down East native, I will say the transition of family-owned properties being sold to buyers from away is not always seen by the certain members of the public as positive progress for a community. And I appreciate the idea behind the design guidelines, but I see a lot of different buckets here. I see, you know, I don't necessarily see professional developers putting in subdivisions in the same bucket as first-time homeowners building a single-family dwelling, you know, for them and their kids. I have some hesitation about the amount of burden that I would put on the former versus, well, I would like to see placed on the former versus the latter. And significant concerns, just speaking for myself, about the idea of developing a community so that it looks good for people to from California to buy houses in. You know, that's not really my primary motivation. So I think there's a lot of different perspectives. All of them are valid, but absolutely, I think that the committee method of having people come together and talk about this, and the more people, the better. Absolutely agree with you. The last thing you want to do is have a small group of people behind closed doors come up with some kind of plan and then publish it to everybody else. I think that would just be a disaster.
Oh, I do. And to bring it to you guys who have to implement it at the very end, I am not interested in that. I'm interested in a lot of public participation, a lot of, I call them kitchen table meetings, you know, identifying all the little neighborhoods, you know, how many neighborhoods are there in Ellsworth, 20 or something, maybe more, and go talk to people and ask them, what do you want, what's your perspective, like you're saying now, what are you thinking you want to come here, so. I just want to talk about a couple other zones, and I'm thinking that we will end like in a half hour or less, just so you know for your timing. Because I'm just trying to get you guys to start thinking about this stuff. No decisions to be being made. You know, like Nell said, these are different perspectives. What are we all thinking about here? The pink zone that looks like Pepto-Bismol over there in the corner on the bottom, that's our commercial zone. And this is where High Street is. This is where Myrick Street?
Myrick.
Myrick Street is. And actually, over in that corner of Ellsworth, there is a development fee. It's a development district, and you help pay for traffic studies and stuff that's over there. It's not actually in our code, but that happens over there. So something to consider is, are we expecting more growth? What kind of growth? So I am in touch with and read about and study what kind of development is expected in the future in terms of retail, and some of the stuff I've read have said big box is out, and that smaller stores are in, and that we're buying more and more stuff online. So do we really need this big pink area? I'm thinking it's big, that's subjective, so I'm sorry, it could not be, you could think it should be bigger. I'm here to collect people's thoughts and put that down. So excuse me when I give mine, sorry. So that's something to think about in that area. Quite a bit is allowed there. I think it's interesting that in this pink area, daycares are allowed, but churches aren't. I know that all over the state of Maine, all over America, big boxes have been turned into, I think they're called mega churches, but I'm not sure. I mean, it's another use. It's got all the parking for the 100 people or 500 people that come to the church. It's got them, but we're not allowing that there as a way to reuse some of those buildings. That was just something I had thought of. Not saying it's bad or good.
Hey, Teresa.
Yep.
Is there a similar concept as to what we were talking about with design guidelines for neighborhoods that would apply to a commercial zone?
Yes, there definitely are, and I think it would be, just because I know that code so well, I think it would be interesting, maybe at some workshop, we'll look at the town of Topsom. Their design guidelines were developed by the planner who was there before me, and he had a master's degree in historic architectural something, so like he really knew what he was talking about. And he was able to, Topsom was not a wealthy community, it's getting wealthier, but it has a big, I think it's really similar to Ellsworth, and its income levels are from this whole span. And he was, so for commercial development, he did have ways to mix things in, and I don't know who's ever been to Topsom, but on Route 196, when you're going up the hill, there are pitched roofs, there are different facades, there are little porches when you enter into a business, and they made it all look like that instead of, it could have looked like flat roofs, cinder blocks, giant signs. The buildings could have been like, you know how Dunkin' Donuts is pink and purple? Well, that's not allowed in Topsom. But you still can build it, you just still can build it, but you can't make their McDonald's or their Dunkin' Donuts the whole building into a sign, but you still can build it. So, yes, Molly, there are ways to do that.
Do they currently exist now for the city of Ellsworth?
No.
No.
No. I'm gonna look at two more zones and then kind of wrap up looking at the map, and and like I said, I'm just trying to give you guys like things to think about in the future when you're poking around with this map, because the comp plan committee is going to come and talk to you at some point. So then we have some other zones. We're going to lump them into one spot. Commerce Park, which is this light brown spot up here, and then Business Park, which is this purpley spot, and Industrial is this violet eggplant. So we've got these three areas. In the industrial area was our business park. It was rezoned in 2012. And I was wondering, Dwight, do you know why? Why it was the business park out where it's the industrial park?
Oh, when they decided to redo the signage, they changed it. They thought that the Commerce Park was better to be called the business park and the business park, and they just kind of switched places a little bit.
Okay. And there are differences in the things that you can do there, and you can look at that. I'm pretty sure that when those areas were established, it's what was already there, but also it's how much of that type of growth Ellsworth thinks it can get. I've heard some people telling me, wow, that eggplant area, this industrial, it's too big, we don't want all that. But the thing is, Ellsworth's mill rate is 18, it's really high relative to other communities around. Our tax base is, we have a lot of nonprofit, we have Jackson Lab, we have the Hancock County, the courthouse is here, other uses that are nonprofits, we're not collecting taxes from them. They're great, I want them to be here, but we don't get taxes from them. What kind of businesses can we, and we get taxes from residents, but not as much as you would from commercial or industrial. So we gotta maybe perhaps balancing that out more. And so perhaps it's great that it's that big, that we could add more of that kind of use, is a thought. So, any thoughts about that?
What kind of industrial uses do we have there? Like, I'm not familiar with.
Yep. So Dwight, can you answer that? Did you hear what Patrick said? What kind of industrial uses are out in the industrial zone or business park?
None.
There's a dump.
But in the old industrial park, and new business park, they're basically industrial uses. We have bulk storage of fuels out there, propane, oil, gasoline. We have our transfer station is out there. We have a compost facility. we have facilities out there that really wouldn't fit too close to a residential area.
We don't have any manufacturing businesses or anything like that in Ellsworth, do we? Anything on any large scale?
No, there used to be one up in the industrial park off Boggy Brook Road, Elscott. They used to do like light bulbs and stuff like that, but they've been out of business for quite a while, so there's, you know, I don't think there's any type of manufacturing, is there, Dwight?
No, not that it would really be commercial manufacturing out there, no.
But I would imagine just with, you know, that's something that maybe the comprehensive plan committee and zoning could think about how do you, if that's something the city wants to incentivize, you know, manufacturing, you know,
Yep.
especially considering all the life science, you know, Jackson Lab and MJ, there's in the Union River Innovation Center, and there could be opportunity to have something grow, and then they need somewhere to,
Right, to do it.
To do
To
it.
make it. And I,
mean, you see other areas around, I mean, even up in Bangor, you know, that have manufacturing facilities like that. I mean, probably besides Elscott, the biggest one before that was actually where the Mill Mall is. I mean, that was a huge textile manufacturing plant, which went out of business in the mid-70s. So, and normally, you know, you have a business like that, and, you know, it's good for the tax base, it's good for jobs.
Jobs, yeah.
You know, they're normally, you know, good paying jobs. You know, you get clean industry, and, you know, unfortunately, I don't think Ellsworth has ever really promoted Ellsworth as a location to come.
Yep. Yeah, I think that Ellsworth has a positive attribute, that we have an economic development director. That's what, her job is getting more jobs here, and her job is finding businesses to come here and grow here, and that's Jana. And she's really been instrumental, her and Mickey Sumner, is that her name?
Mickey, yeah.
Getting the innovation center going, and just so successful. And then she'll be growing more on that, so. And this industrial area is out on Bucksburg Road. I mean, we have the transportation infrastructure, roads, if you will, to move stuff through and to get up to Bangor that way. So I wanted to say a little bit about the rural zone, because it's this light, it's the green. It's this light green that's all over the place. And what do we allow there? And in our comprehensive plan, we say that our rural areas where we want to discourage development, we want to be able to protect our forest land. 40% of Ellsworth's land base is in tree growth, and tree growth is a tax program that if you put your land in tree growth, then you have to manage the forest, and you pay very little taxes, if any, depending on lots of things. But it's a way to help people keep their land in forestry production. And so Ellsworth has quite a bit of forest, and it's managed. But we also, in our code, the rural area, you can build a house out there with 1 acre, a 1 acre lot. And is that discouraging growth out there? And I can just totally guess that when the comprehensive plan was made and the zoning was made, that the town was considering, well, you know, my relatives live out there, or my family lives out there, and I don't want to make the lot size 2 or 5 or 10 acres, because then I can't build a house out there. Or, if you're going to make the lot size, that's one way to discourage development, is large lots. If I make them 10-acre lots out there, where does my retirement go? That's 1 house for 10 acres. But if the acreage out there is 1 acre per house, I can sell 10 houses. And I can retire, or send my kids to college, or help my parents when they get older, whatever. Because I've heard all these arguments in all the comp plans I've ever worked on. It's really tricky. What do you do with your rural land, where you might want to discourage development because you're trying to promote agriculture and forestry? Mostly Ellsworth has forestry industry that's out there. And if it all gets divided all up into housing, that creates more costs for the towns in terms of buses for the schools, and all your public facilities get taxed. And it can make more money, it can make the town have to pay more money that is not balanced off by the taxes that are earned. There's so many things to think about. If you look off, I don't know if you can see where I'm pointing, yep, thank you, Nate. Industrial area going west of Bucksburg Road, you see all these subdivisions? This is not helping our rural area, but there's a lot of houses out there. But it doesn't fit in with the concept that was written in the comprehensive plan of, let's try to protect our rural area. But then we want all the housing just to be down here, that's not gonna work. So I'm giving you hard things to think about, and I know that. Also in the rural area, we have something called cluster, and have you guys had to deal with that lately? In planning board cluster subdivision, has that been forward to you guys at all?
I don't think we've done one lately.
Lately? Okay, so in our code, if you want to look it up later or now, it's in the subdivision, which is in section 7, 12.9, it talks about cluster, and it says that, pretty much you can make smaller lot sizes that are allowed out there, but it doesn't say too much else, and it's, in my opinion, because I've written several cluster zoning ordinances, it's very weak, it doesn't do it too much, helps the developer have smaller lots than are permitted out there, but it doesn't give too much to the city in protecting rural areas, in my humble little tiny opinion. And I think that could be improved.
Well, Dwight, wasn't it hasn't gone anyplace, but the tiny house subdivision off Route 1, wasn't that considered a cluster subdivision?
Yes, it was, John. And also the one that's going in back of Denver Way that Mr.
Bates is doing. Yeah.
That originally started, that would end up being a cluster also.
Right, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
And the reason being, they take advantage.
Dwight, can you say that again?
Go ahead, Teresa. I was saying that John Bates's project will come to us as a cluster subdivision,
Right,
taking advantage of the options to have a reduced lot size from 1 acre down to whatever they come up with.
right. And
Do they have shared common space then? Is that how they get around it with the cluster?
yeah, but in our code, it's very weak.
That's correct.
So just in a terminology that I'm personally used to, what's the difference between a cluster zone and what might be called plan unit development? Teresa?
Yes, I heard that. So a plan unit development has all, it's outlined what you're allowed to be doing in it, and it's, it talks about roads and sidewalks and what the buildings look like and so forth. A clustered subdivision, the more intent of that is to protect open space, to be setting it aside for parkland or recreational land, and that's supposed to be the trade-off for being allowed to have smaller lot sizes. Like, okay, developer, we'll let you have smaller lot sizes out here in the rural area. In exchange, you're gonna take the back of your lot, or the side of it, or whatever, and put it in permanent open space, and maybe do a conservation easement with the town, or the Frenchman's Bay Conservancy or something. We don't have that written in our code. It's almost as if a developer gets to have smaller lots and not have to do too much to be able to do that. Plan unit developments don't talk about saving open space on the side.
And just a comment on, going back for just a second to the, performance standards, design standards and so forth. There was an ad hoc zoning committee that was looking at something that was being called a convenience center. And what was in there, one of the things that was interesting about that was were the rules and so forth that were being proposed for, performance standards. And it was a kind of a different kind of zone. So if you dig that out, it might be kind of neat.
Yeah. So there's quite a bit to think about in the rural area, and the one exercise that I want to do when we start the comp plan is identify all the large lot owners, so if you have 10 acres or more. And if you look out, if you look at the lot lines, there are lots that are 500 acres and 300 acres. We have some really large lots that are owned by timber companies. And I would like to go interview them and ask them, what's your idea? Are you thinking you want to subdivide this someday? Do you want to keep it in forestry? Do you know, do you not know? What's your vision? Because we don't want to put zoning in that doesn't fit with the landowners either. It's such a delicate balance of helping people try to figure out. And then also paying attention to who grew up here, who's got relatives here, what do you think the town's supposed to be looking like? As opposed to, I'm someone who owns a lot of timberland here, what do I want to look like? Or I'm from away, what do I want to look like? And I'm a low income person, and I'm a middle income, and I'm a high income. There are so many different things that are going to clash when any town talks about this. But it's time for Ellsworth to talk about it again, because we haven't in so long. I'm going to go over one more zoning district and kind of, I feel that this is all really overwhelming stuff, like there's so much I'm just throwing at you. So that's why I want to end in a little while and not just go on and on, if you can appreciate that. So the last one I'm going to look at is the west side of Ellsworth, is this emerald green color all around Branch Lake. And Branch Lake, as you probably already all know, is our drinking water supply. So we have a drinking water district all around there, and in the drinking water district, you can have an 80,000 square foot lot, which is around 2 acres. If you're right on the shore, it has to be 90,000 or like around 1.5 acres. So they want you to have a larger lot size. If you are on the shore, you see how on the shoreline there's these hatched lines? So, like all around it? So that's limited residential. If you look in chapter, I think shoreline zoning is your tab 4. No, that's non-conforming. Doesn't matter. Shoreline zoning is in there, and so you have to pay special attention to rules that Dwight gets a lot into for shoreline zoning. Have you guys looked at shoreline zoning a lot lately, or at all, or been in front of the planning board? I don't think you've had too many things lately in that. So that's what that big green area is. Not a lot of uses are allowed out there. You see that there's dark blue veins. See all these, those are all streams. And actually, on Friday, Dwight and I and John Whedon, who works on watershed issues in the city, we're going to be looking at some proposed shoreland zoning amendments that Michelle, who was your planner just, for all that time, she's proposed a bunch of shoreline zoning amendments, including taking these streams and reducing them from 75-foot setbacks to 25. Is that right, Dwight? Dwight? Dwight, can you just...
Yes, that's correct.
Could you say why
we're doing that? We're doing it to be consistent with what the state's minimum guidelines are. A lot of those little runoffs are just seasonal water that pass through a culvert under a road. And the impact this has, that people that bought lots for investment, they come back to build, and they've got a little ripple of water running through their property. They have to meet 75 feet on either down the middle of their lot. Situations like that, so. We're going to look at it. It may not go through, but we're going to look at it and see if we can become more consistent with the state's minimum guidelines.
Right, for streams. And you guys are going to be seeing that in the next couple months, or maybe even sooner, depending on how, like the map's already done, I believe, right, Dwight? The mapping is done for this, and now we're looking at the...
Yes, map.
Yeah, and so there's actual code language that we're going to be looking at too, and then bringing it to you guys, so especially pointing that out. You're going to see that sooner than later, like before the comprehensive plan gets started, because we, like Dwight said, we want to fit in with the state. The DEP every now and then looks at shoreline zoning and goes, oh, there's something else we want to just be looking at or examining, or something else we've learned about how to protect shoreline zone areas in Maine. Does anyone else have any other like zoning, land use things? And I'll say one or two more things and we can go home. Was this helpful? Useful, just to kind of introduce you to our zoning map and uses, and when you look at, you know, I'm hoping that when you guys open your packages and you look at what different applications come forward, that you go do a site visit, that you look on your land use map and you're like, oh, where is this place? What zone is it in? What's on the chart? What can I be thinking about? And not just rely on what the staff says, like, we think you should pass this. Because it's up to you guys to decide, and how you match it with the code. I'm gonna leave you with, so Carrie has been working on this project. I think she's doing a great job. We would really like to unify our code so that subdivision and the land use ordinance and shoreline zoning are all one piece. It's a lot easier to read. Right now, when we look at things, you have to keep going back and forth, and can get confusing. We're starting off with definitions. So Carrie has gone through, and it's not done, but I wanted to let you guys just start looking at this, because I'm going to bring this forward to you too at some point. She took a definition and then said, what does it say in the Unified Development Ordinance? What's it say in subdivision? What's it say in shoreline? And then her column F talks about, she put comments in there, like she has this one with agriculture. Agricultural activity and processing commercial is equivalent in these two, but it's different in that one over there, and the wording is different, and she gave you some things to think about. We are eventually, and it's gonna be tedious, but we wanna make this all the same, and when you look at Carrie's chart, there aren't, a lot of it is, a lot of our definitions in the latest ordinance are the same as shoreline zoning, because they started in shoreline zoning, because all our codes started in shoreline zoning. We're trying to make it more consistent, and if you have a paper copy of this, you probably need a magnifying glass, I appreciate that. But so we gave this to you online, if you ever wanted to peek at it before it starts being presented to you. That's what this is, that's what we're trying to do, is unify our code, we're starting with that. There is an idea to, and Dwight, could you speak to this? There is an idea to maybe put some building code definitions in here too?
Yes, that's one of the issues we have in the code enforcement office and Mike has with the fire department. In 2012, the state mandated that all communities with a population of 4,000 people, we had to adopt portions of the International Building Code. We have no control over their definitions, so we're going to have to transpose their definitions into our ordinances in those appropriate places. Most of those definitions are going to deal with what is multi-use, what's an assembly use, and issues like that. So, and I believe Mike is working on that list now, Teresa.
Yep. So that's a forewarning, that's coming to you before this whole comprehensive, because I really like John's comment, like, well, comprehensive plan is going to take a long time before we get to really digging into some of the stuff we talked about tonight. But definitions we can do now, shoreline zoning we can do now, some of this building code stuff, that needs to get done so we are less frustrated upstairs. And possibly you could be less frustrated using the code. That those things, yes, we want them to match with our vision that we make in the comp plan, but we also, it will, because they're just basic things. The last thing on this agenda, and I'm gonna end at 1:15. So I have 2 minutes or 3 minutes or something. The last thing on this agenda is what recommendations to the Unified Development Ordinance. And I'm going to bring those at our next, and I will send them to you before there. And I'm hoping if we even at, well, you know, we'll workshop it, public hearing it, bring it to the council. There are little mistakes I've been finding in the code that I'd like to fix, just little things. To see if you guys agree or not, and if you don't, then we don't put it to public hearing. If you do, then we bring it to the public hearing and see what the public thinks, and then bring it to council. One quick one that's really bugging me is it says, in part of the code where it talks about what you have to hand in to the planning board, like, how many copies of the plan and that sort of thing. It says, in general, applications are due at 4 o'clock on Thursday of the first Wednesday, or whatever it says. And that in general, we have to get rid of that because it's maddening, because it's not consistent. And developers are like, well, it says in general, I could just bring it in at 5, can't I? Or I was gonna bring it in tomorrow morning, okay? And it messes up when Carrie sends out the abutters notices, and when we do public hearings, and when we're able to set an agenda for you. And it's not administratively, consistently fair with different developers. And that's oftentimes, a lot of times when planning board stuff goes to court, it's not the big issue that someone loses their court case, it's some administrative thing. So we want to get rid of those, so we can be more clean, have a more clean, straightforward code. Anybody have anything else to say? I hope that was useful. I try not to be a talking head, talk more.
No, it's good to get some ideas tossed around for future consideration.
Yeah. And so our next meeting is on the 21st. It's on this just one item, this little solar farm. And like I said, come in and get your application. Your TRT report will be emailed to you tomorrow afternoon. So you'll get that. But please come in and get this application. We're hoping that this meeting, it's all up to you, but we're really hoping that this meeting on the 21st, which starts at 5:30, we're hoping we can just do this in a half hour or 40 minutes. It's a preliminary review. Tell them what's wrong with it or not wrong with it, and hopefully send them off to final. You might not, but if you did, then they could do final on November 7th. Their goal is, if you give them final review, which you may not, or you may, they can start digging and putting their poles in before it snows. That's what they're aiming for. They know it might not work, but that's what they're trying for, and that's so, just so you know.
I mean, I'll say for future reference, though, I'm not too keen on coming into a meeting with a time
Yeah.
allotment max. Because the city council has a meeting at 6:30, and I think it has to do with broadcasting, so I'm not too keen on coming into a preliminary and say, okay, you gotta finish this in 45 minutes.
Yeah,
I mean, this is, for a solar project, a small one, reading through real quick, it's 4,000 square feet, which, in our new ordinance, they're gonna have to provide a decommissioning plan. And considering how long it took
yeah,
the city and Sunrays to come up, granted that was a lot bigger, I mean, they're gonna have to provide a decommissioning plan, and to get that done, before ground freezes, which is pretty soon, I'm not gonna be hurried.
right. And I appreciate that comment, John, and I wanted to add something that this meeting was, because it's a public hearing, we have to advertise it. So it was advertised at the time, at 5:30, we're gonna be reviewing it. And after that happened, other city staff came forward and said, oh, we wanna have a meeting at 6:30. And can you change yours? Can you change the time? I'm like, no, it's already advertised in the Ellsworth American and the planning board. It's not something you can just, this is the planning board. You can't just change it. So I think that if you guys are reviewing this and it gets time that the meeting has to stop, then it's not gonna go through to the next stage, and that's the way it is. But I can't change the time. We've already.
No, I understand that.
Right, and I did this, and then it came up with, could we, the city, also have another meeting that night? And I think they got, whoever they are in the city, it doesn't matter, but they got caught off guard kind of, because we usually don't have special planning board meetings. So things happen. But I think you guys should be approaching this with, it's 5:30, we're looking at this, and what's happening, and what do we do, and I'm only giving you this a day or two early. I'm not waiting for the TRT report to come out, because it's gonna have 2 lines on it. Where's your decommissioning plan, and where's your Maine Coast Heritage, where's your Natural Areas Program letter? Because they may or may not be disturbing the Nantucket what's it called, Nantucket shrubs, it's not called that, but it's a rare endangered plant. It's only like 7 spots in the state of Maine it grows, and it's on the edge of this project. So I want the critical areas program to go, it's on the edge, it's not touching it, or if it is, then you guys address that. Those are the only 2 comments you're gonna be getting. Otherwise, he's got everything in there. But not to be rushed. I totally appreciate that comment. John, do you close this because you're in the chair?
Well, I mean, we don't have to, we don't need, I don't think, believe we need a motion for adjournment, so
Okay.
I'll just say good night.
Good night, and thanks for coming,
See you on the
guys.
21st, which will
Night.
be a total Zoom meeting, correct?
Yes.
The meeting on the
Yes.
21st?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.